Have you ever noticed how certain places have a way of changing you? Not necessarily because of the scenery and not because of the weather, but because of how it felt when you were there. For me, that's the Hawaiian Islands. Now, I want to be clear about something right from the beginning. I'm not Hawaiian, and I would never pretend to fully understand a culture that isn't my own. What I can't speak to is my experience, though. And also all of the lessons I've been fortunate enough to take home with me over the years. My son Zach and I have made Hawaii our second home and make it a part of our annual holiday and his birthday tradition. My son also went to the University of Hawaii. Every year, we find ourselves drawn back, not just because of the breathtaking beaches or incredible sunsets, but because of something that's much harder to describe, a feeling, a way of treating people, a way of slowing down just enough to notice one another. Most people recognize the word aloha as a greeting, but over the years, I've come to appreciate that, for many, it represents something much deeper. It's a spirit rooted in kindness, compassion, respect, humility, and genuine care for others. Those are values I admire, and values I've tried to carry with me long after the plane lands back in Seattle. And that got me thinking, what if the greatest souvenir we bring home from a meaningful place isn't what we pack in the suitcase? What if it's a better way of living? And so today, this isn't really about Hawaii. It's about the possibility that one way of treating people can strengthen our families, influence our workplaces, deepen our friendships, and quietly change the lives of people we meet every single day. So today, I'd like to explore something I'm calling the Aloha Effect. Are you ready? I am. I'm Jonah. I'm your person. Let's get to it. Aloha, and welcome back to the show. Whether you're listening from the Hawaiian Islands, Fiji, New Zealand, Bora Bora, Costa Rica, or any of the 79 countries that make up this community of challengers, welcome. I'm so glad you're here spending this time with me. There are some places in the world that seem to leave an imprint on us, not because they're perfect, but because they awaken something that we've been missing. For me, Hawaii has become one of those places. Every year, my son Zach and I look forward to returning to the islands. We spend countless hours at the beach. We watch the sunrise and sunsets, listen and watch waves, laugh probably more than we should, and somehow, life feels just a little lighter. And I've often wondered why. I think to myself, is it the ocean, which I just love, and I've spent so much of my life in the ocean? Is it the trade winds, the slower pace? Maybe. But I think it's something much deeper than that. And I've come to believe that certain places don't just simply give us memories. They remind us of values we don't want to lose. And for me, Hawaii has become one of those reminders. Not because I believe kindness only exists there, far from it, but because every time I visit, I'm reminded how meaningful kindness, respect, patience, and genuine human connections can be. Those qualities, they seem easier to notice when life slows down enough for us to see them. And that's what made me wonder, what if the greatest gift we bring home from a meaningful place isn't a souvenir, but it's a decision to carry a little bit more patience into our homes, a little more compassion into our friendships, or a little more respect into our workplaces, or a little more grace in the conversation we'll have tomorrow. Maybe that's part of what I've been bringing home all of these years. Not just memories of Hawaii, but a quieter reminder of the kind of person I hope to continue to become. Let's dive a bit deeper into what I mean. Here in part 2, we're going to talk about the Aloha Effect. When most of us hear the word aloha, we naturally think of a greeting. Hello, goodbye. But over the years, I've learned that for the majority of people in Hawaii and others around the world who are connected with the Hawaiian Islands, aloha carries a much deeper meaning. Whilst I would never presume to define it for those who have lived it for their entire lives, I've come to appreciate it as something much bigger than a word. To me, it's a way of showing up. It's treating people with dignity, even when you have nothing to gain. It's offering kindness before judgment. It's choosing patience when frustration would be easier. It's seeing another human being before seeing their title, their differences, or the circumstances they're carrying that you know nothing about. I've noticed something else, too. Whenever Zach and I return from Hawaii, we don't spend the flight home talking about souvenirs. We talk about moments, the conversations, the laughter, the people, the feeling. And honestly, if I'm being honest, he sleeps most of the way home. And maybe of those things that I just mentioned, that's because the most meaningful things we experience in life can't be packed into a suitcase. They become part of us instead. And that has made me wonder, maybe aloha isn't something we leave behind when we board the plane home. Maybe it's something we have the opportunity to carry forward. Not perfectly, not every day, but intentionally. Because the world gives us countless opportunities to choose how we show up. At home, at work, with our friends, with our families, as a leader, and even with complete strangers. And perhaps every one of those moments quietly asks us the same question. What kind of experience will someone have because they spent a few moments with me? Maybe. That's where the Aloha Effect begins. Now let's talk about that here in part 3. One of the things I've come to admire about the philosophy of Aloha is that it doesn't ask us to become different people depending on where we are. It doesn't ask us to be compassionate just at home and impatient at work. It doesn't ask us to be humble with our family and prideful in positions of leadership. The values I've come to associate with Aloha, love, compassion, peace, humility and patience, mutual respect, and living in harmony with others, don't recognize those boundaries. They're meant to travel with us into our homes, into our friendships, into our communities, and yes, even into our workplace. I've spent more than 3 decades of my life working in the profession of human resources, and if there's one thing I've learned, it's this. People may forget the details of the meeting. They may forget the exact words that were spoken, but they rarely forget how you treated them. I've seen leaders who could walk into a room and immediately lower everyone's stress level, not because they had all the answers, but because they listened. They were present. They treated people with dignity, respect, and compassion. They made others feel seen. I've also seen the opposite. The truth is, every workplace has a culture. Not the one hanging on the wall, the one people experience every single day. Culture isn't built by mission statements alone. It's built in ordinary moments. It's built in the way we answer a question from someone who's still learning. It's built in how we respond when a mistake is made. It's built in whether people feel respected when they leave our office, our store, our meeting, or even a brief conversation in the hallway. The same is true at home. Our families experience the culture we create. Our friends experience the culture we create. Our children experience the culture we create. Maybe that's one of the quiet invitations Aloha offers us. Not perfectionism, but awareness. An awareness that every interaction is an opportunity to bring a little more kindness, a little more humility, a little more patience into someone else's day. And that leads me to something I've been challenging myself to think about lately. If Aloha is lived one interaction at a time, what does that actually look like in our everyday lives? Let's talk about that next in the next part. I've been wondering about something else lately. What if one of the greatest gifts we could give another person isn't advice or solutions or even the perfect words? What if it's simply an experience of feeling safe in our presence? Not physically safe, emotionally safe, or mentally safe. The kind of safety that allows someone to lower their shoulders, take a deep breath, and know that they don't have to pretend for just a few more moments. I think many of us underestimate the power of that. We live in a world that moves quickly. We're encouraged to react instead of reflect, to win arguments instead of understand people. to respond before we've truly listened. Somewhere along the way, many conversations became competitions instead of connections. Maybe that's one of the reasons why the philosophy of aloha has stayed with me. When I think about the values I've come to admire, love, compassion, peace, humility, and patience, mutual respect, and living in harmony with others, I don't see weakness. I see strength. I see centeredness. I see groundedness. Because it's much easier to lose your patience than to practice it. It's much easier to assume the worst than to believe there's a story we haven't heard yet. It's much easier to protect our pride than to lead with humility. The strongest people I've known weren't the loudest people in the room, and I've said this in previous episodes. They were the ones who made others feel seen. They listened without rushing. They corrected without humiliating. They led without demanding attention. They understood something that I think all of us are still learning. People don't flourish when they feel judged. They flourish when they feel valued. And maybe that's why aloha begins as a mindset before it even becomes a way of life. Before we choose our words, before we decide how we'll respond, before life tests our patience, we've already decided what kind of person we hope to be. And when we make that decision often enough, something remarkable begins to happen. The atmosphere around us changes. Our families notice. Our friends notice. Our coworkers notice. Even complete strangers notice. Not because we announced a new philosophy, but because they experienced it. Perhaps that's the quiet beauty of the Aloha Effect. It doesn't ask us to be extraordinary. It simply invites us to become a little bit more intentional, one conversation at a time. And here's your first challenge for the week. This week, choose one interaction each day and intentionally practice the spirit of aloha. Slow down. Listen a little longer. Take some deep breaths along the way. Offer patience a little sooner. Assume the best before assuming the worst. And before that conversation ends, quietly ask yourself, did this person leave feeling a little lighter than we first met? You may never know the answer to that, but I have a feeling they'll remember the experience. In this next part, I'd like to share why this message has become deeply personal to me, because sometimes the greatest reminders of who we're becoming come from the people who know us best. If you're enjoying today's episode, I'd be grateful if you'd take just a few minutes to support the show. Follow or subscribe on your favorite podcast app, or leave a rating or a review. If you haven't already, share the episode with someone who could use a little bit more aloha in their life. Your support helps Challenge Accepted with Jonah C reach more people around the world, and together, we're building a community that's choosing to think deeper, live kinder, and grow stronger. Now, let's get back to the show. All right, let's talk about how aloha connects with the legacy we leave here in part 5. I've always believed that the most meaningful moments in life often are the ones we don't see coming. They aren't planned, they aren't rehearsed, they just simply happen, and then they stay with us. Not long ago, I was traveling for work, helping train a new field executive. As we wrapped up our visit, I thanked the manager and the assistant manager for welcoming us into their work environment. I told them how grateful I was to finally get to meet them in person and how fortunate we were to have leaders like them on our team. As we were getting ready to leave, the manager looked at me and said something I wasn't expecting. She simply smiled and said, "Thank you for being so kind." And for a moment, I didn't know what to say. And if you know me, you know that's a pretty rare occurrence. I finally managed to respond. I said, "I don't know what to say, but thank you for the feedback. I really appreciate it." And everyone laughed because they knew I actually had been caught speechless. But after I got to my car, I kept thinking about those words. Not because they were directed at me and not to make this sound about me, but because they reminded me of something. We rarely remember every conversation we've had. We rarely remember every piece of advice someone gave us, but we definitely remember how often someone made us feel. And around that same time, my birthday had come around. My son Zach gave me a card that I'll probably keep for the rest of my life. In it, He wrote that I was one of his best friends. That was definitely not something I expected to read, even though we expressed this to each other about 6 years ago. It was something I hoped I had earned over the years. And as I reflected on both of those moments, I realized they had something in common. Neither one was about achievement. Neither one was about success. And neither one had anything to do with a title. They were both reminders that the legacy we're building isn't measured only by what we accomplish. It's also measured by the experiences people have when they share life with us. Maybe that's one of the quiet lessons Aloha has been teaching me all along. Long after people forget what we say, they may remember how we made them feel. In the next part, I'd like to leave you with one final challenge, one that doesn't end when the episode is over, but has the potential to travel with you wherever life takes you. As we've spent this time together, I keep coming back to one thought. Eventually, the vacation ends. The plane lands, the luggage gets unpacked, and life returns to normal. Emails begin filling our inbox, meetings return to the calendar, the laundry still needs to be done, and the bills still need to be paid. Real life has a way of waiting for all of us. And maybe that's where the real opportunity begins. Because it's one thing to experience peace in a beautiful place. It's another thing entirely to bring that same spirit into an ordinary Tuesday. I've wondered if that's the real test of any philosophy we admire. Not whether it inspires us whilst we're surrounded by beauty, but whether it changes us after we've returned home. Maybe that's what I've been trying to do without even realizing it. Not recreate Hawaii, not pretend every day feels like a vacation, but carry forward the values that have spoken to me year over year, year after year, time and time again, to become a little bit more patient, a little bit more compassionate, a little quicker to listen, a little slower to judge, and a little more aware that every person I meet is living a story I'll probably never fully know. Perhaps that's what it means to live with intention. Not waiting for extraordinary moments to become extraordinary people, but allowing ordinary moments to reveal the best within us. If enough of us chose to do that, our homes might feel different. Our friendships might feel different. Our workplaces might feel different. And maybe, just maybe, our communities would feel different too. Not because the world suddenly changed, but because we did. And here's your last challenge for the week. This week, don't leave Aloha behind when this episode ends. Choose one value you've heard today. Love, compassion, peace, kindness, humility, patience, harmony, or respect. And make it your intention for the entire week. Not just when it's convenient, especially when it isn't. Then, at the end of the week, ask yourself one simple question. How did choosing that one value change the way I experienced the people around me and the way they experienced me? You may discover that the smallest shifts in mindset often create the biggest shifts in our lives. In our final part, I'd like to leave you with one last thought, one that I hope stays with you long after the episode comes to an end. As we come to the end of today's episode, I keep thinking about something that's beautifully simple. The world doesn't need another perfect person. It doesn't need another flawless leader. It doesn't need another family that appears to have everything figured out. I think what the world needs is more people who are willing to live with intention. People who choose kindness when they could choose indifference. People who offer respect before it's earned. People who extend compassion before they fully understand someone's story. People who have the humility to listen and the patience to pause and the courage to lead with love. Maybe that's one of the reasons why Aloha has resonated with me for so many years. Not because I see it as something reserved for Hawaii, but because I see it as an invitation to become a little more thoughtful, a little more patient, a little more present, a little more aware that every conversation leaves something behind. Sometimes it's encouragement. Sometimes it's hope. Sometimes it's healing. And sometimes it's simply the quiet reminder that another human being cared enough to make us feel seen. I've come to believe that our lives are shaped far more by these ordinary moments than the extraordinary ones. A smile, a conversation, a word of encouragement, a sincere apology, a genuine thank you, and looking at someone with sincerity in your heart saying, "Aloha." Those moments rarely make headlines, but they often change lives. So maybe the question isn't whether we can change the whole world. Maybe the better question is, who will experience a better world because they experienced us? If enough of us ask questions of ourselves like that, I wonder what kind of world we could create together. Before we wrap up this episode, I'd like to leave you with some final thoughts. As I was writing this episode, I found myself thinking about all the years that Zach and I spent traveling back and forth to Hawaii together. I thought about all the years before me when Zach was traveling back and forth to Hawaii with his papa, my former partner. It has been an honor to pick up that torch and share these life-changing experiences with our son. Every trip has given us beautiful memories. The beaches, the sunrises, the sunsets, the laughter, the conversations, the amazing food, the quiet moments that somehow became the ones we remember the most. But as grateful as I am for those experiences, I've come to realize that the greatest gift Hawaii has given me isn't something I can photograph or pack into a suitcase or bring home in a carry-on. It's a reminder to slow down, to be present, to choose kindness, to lead with humility, to offer compassion before criticism, and to remember that every person I meet is carrying a story I'll probably never fully know. And I just remembered something, and I don't want to leave it out. Before Zach and I went to Hawaii together, we established a form of aloha before we even stepped foot on the island. This is a little awkward and not planned. I'll be right back. Don't pause the show. Hold on. I'll be right back. I'm coming back. All right. I'm back. I wanted to read something that has been on our refrigerator for such a long time. And I'd like to read something that has given us direction and presence. And it's been on the refrigerator door ever since I moved to Seattle. Here it goes. In this house, we do real. We do mistakes. We say, "I'm sorry." We share laughter. We give hugs. We help those in need. We forgive. We chase dreams. We love. I cut and paste this from some website I saw a long time ago, but it's something that my son Zach and I have revisited over the years when times got tough or when we had many disagreements. And it really brought us back to center. Have we lived that perfectly? Not a chance. But perfection was never the goal. Becoming a little bit more intentional than we were yesterday, that has always been a goal worth pursuing. And maybe that's what the Aloha Effect really is. Not becoming someone else, not pretending that life is always peaceful, and not trying to recreate Hawaii wherever we go, but allowing the values we've come to admire, love, compassion, peace, humility, patience, and harmony, and respect, to quietly shape the way we move through the world. If today's conversation encouraged you in some way, I hope you'll carry one small piece of it with you for the rest of the week, if not for the rest of your life. Not because I said so, but because you chose it. But because that's where real change begins. One decision, one conversation, one relationship, one person at a time. Thank you for spending part of your day with me. And until next time, keep challenging yourself. Keep growing. Keep choosing the kind of person you hope the world experiences. Have a wonderful week and aloha. Mahalo. See you next week.